Hey guys, welcome to our next lesson. It's going to be our last one on the American Revolution, and in particular, what it's going to end with. This one will not take us long. It's only a few slides, and by a few I mean like 5 or 6. It's pretty quick. The thing that we'll want to kind of be returning to in this several times is that, again, we're wrapping up the war, and so we're trying to kind of understand things from a kind of a broad perspective. We're not going to be diving too much into military history. Again, that's not kind of the focus of the class. But anyways, enough delaying. Let's get to it, shall we? The end of the American Revolution. Now, again, we're looking at, big, broad trends about how the war is going to kind of ebb and flow. There's a few battles in particular that you'll need to know kind of walking out of this, but then in particular, I'd also like you to look at some of the various perspectives and advantages and disadvantages that some of the colonies, had compared to the British, and we'll talk about that more at the beginning. So, the epic end of the American Revolution. So we're going to be looking at, lots of things, in terms of advantages and disadvantages here at the beginning of this. So, are there other outside factors that can kind of influence how a war goes? And the answer is yes, there's quite a lot. War just doesn't exist in a vacuum. So we're also going to be looking at then with the war, wrapping up, what are going to be the costs? Okay, what are going to be some of the things that we're kind of left with at the end? But we'll get to that more here in a little bit. Now, you don't need to take notes on this slide. This is just old stuff, and I'm actually going to go and fix formatting here since I see that I'm having formatting issues. All of this is just kind of general information that, you should be aware of. Now, obviously, it goes without saying that in the Revolutionary War, the different sides are going to have particular advantages and disadvantages. This is true of two sides of anything, right? And that the important thing that you need to understand walking away from this is that these advantages and disadvantages are going to interact with each other at the exact same time in terms of not only each other, but then the actions that particular actors are going to take, the different strategies that the different sides are going to try to win the war with, quote unquote. There's just a lot of things there. So now you want to make sure you're kind of writing it down from this point. Let's talk about what Great Britain's advantages are. First of all, it kind of goes without saying that Great Britain is much better organized and much better funded, even though they're in debt, when the war begins. They have access to a huge amount of imperial resources. For example, because they have more access to money, they can, they can go and they can buy foreign soldiers that are called Hessians, because they come from a particular part of Germany called Hesse, and they can use them to fight the Americans. The other advantage that they have is that, and I think we can, again, generally summarize, is that Great Britain also had a government that was much more unified on winning the war. There was disagreement within Great Britain's government, but not to the degree that there would be like in the colonies. The disadvantages for Great Britain, though, probably the singular largest disadvantage is that they are conducting a war from overseas. And the amount of time that it would take for a ship to cross the Atlantic with news is anywhere from 2 to 3 months. So if you can kind of think about this, if you're for example, the king, let's say something happens in the colonies, well, it's going to take 3 months for you to be able to hear about it, and then it's going to take another 3 months for them to hear what you would like to do about it. And so that is a 6-month delay on things. Now, it's not like, again, the king is mostly going to have to defer to then the people in the colonies as to what to do, but that makes any kind of central government planned kind of response, there's a pretty serious lag time there, right? And that makes conducting a war difficult. Again, imagine ordering a pizza and it doesn't show up for 6 months, and you kind of get the idea. Advantages of the colonies. Fighting with home field advantage. There like definitely something to that. The other thing that is, I think, arguably the bigger thing than even home field advantage is that the requirements for the colonies to win are not the same things for the British to win. All that the Americans have to do is stay alive. They do not have to go over and invade Britain itself. They don't have to go and kill the king. Okay. But for Britain, like, they have to send armies over to the colonies. They have to either destroy, in particular, George Washington's army would have been the big goal. But they have to break the will of the colonies, and that's a much harder sell than what the colonists have to do. And all they have to do is just basically keep Washington moving and alive. And if they can do that, and his army alive and the Continental Army alive, then it's going to work out. The disadvantages for the colonists, though, are pretty severe. And a lot of it has to do with consistency. They have no reliable tax revenue for fighting. And again, wars cost money. They're expensive. They're also not well organized. So, for example, when there's U.S. troops staying in Valley Forge, they are critically low on supplies, ammunition, things like that you would need. The other thing is that the Americans, not until France starts kind of unofficially sending them stuff, and then eventually when France does finally join them, they do not, they're alone, right? They're on their own until France steps in, and so that makes things difficult. A question for you, just a hypothetical one. Could Great Britain have won? And if so, what do you think today's world would look like? We would be all speaking in different accents. I don't know. You can give me an answer there with that. And then continue on with the rest of the lesson. So let's talk about kind of like the big ebb and flow of the war and what people are wanting from it and those kind of things, the goals and objectives and how things kind of go. The beginning of the war, the British plan is to basically isolate the troublemakers, and that is New England. And after Boston, okay, what happens is the British actually leave Boston for a while, and the British come back and they decide to invade New York because they really understand that New York is where, for example, like the Continental Congress is very consistently meeting, and they decide to invade New York. And at that point, the beginning of the war does not look very promising for the colonists. Americans are just basically consistently retreating and attacking, and Washington is just focused on, can I keep the Continental Army alive, and can I keep it moving in order just to keep America in the war and fighting. Probably the best backhanded compliment that Washington ever gets about a military commander during this time is that he's really good at retreating, which is not exactly, something you want to be known for, but there you go. Now, if you look here at our beautiful map that you can check out here, you can kind of see this, and the blue lines kind of going back and forth are kind of the big emphasis here. Let's talk about, though, Saratoga. A lot of historians will look back at Saratoga and say this is the moment where clearly something in the war has shifted. Now, it wasn't like Americans hadn't had victories up until this point. They certainly had, but it was, I think, in some ways the scale of Saratoga that really was kind of the game changer, so to speak. So the British attempted, after they try to isolate New York, the way they decide that they're going to do this is they're going to try to basically cut the middle and the northern colonies up into three. And so you can actually go back here and you can see this on this map. They're going to, first of all, try to cut, for example, like these middle colonies off from the south. That's kind of the first cut. So there's like a line, if you can imagine it, like right there. And then the other way, so there's your first line, give or take, a few thousand miles right there. And then the second one is this line that's heading south here from Burgoyne, coming down from Quebec. And you can see here they're trying to kind of cut the colonies up into thirds. Now what happens is John Burgoyne is a general for the British. He starts marching south from Quebec, because again, the British own that now and have since the French and Indian War. Burgoyne is kind of an odd character. He's nicknamed Gentleman Johnny. He carries all of his very fancy, expensive things with him. And as he starts to travel south, and he's got all of his wagons of supplies for his soldiers, and then his own personal stuff, he basically just kind of gets slowed and bogged down, and they get surrounded. 5,000 British troops are captured in what is called then the Battle of Saratoga, which if you look back here is right here. Okay, it's kind of in the middle of New York, kind of over by Massachusetts. Saratoga is a big deal because not only does it eliminate a whole British army, which is a big deal in and of itself, but it's going to cause France to officially announce that they are going to be allying with the colonies. Now, France had already been sending weapons to the colonists, but now they're going to be very openly like, yep, we're doing this, and also we're going to be more than happy to fight Britain overseas as well. So France is going to announce a formal military alliance with the colonies at this point, and that's arguably an even bigger deal. Because again, you get official recognition that like your rebellion is an official thing. So the war coming to the end, Great Britain decides after Saratoga that they're going to refocus their efforts on the southern colonies. This is kind of a controversial decision because again, it's a change of place. It's also not Boston or New York, who have been the constant thorn in their sides. And actually, things go really, really well for them. The British general who's in charge, Cornwallis, though, he is going to get trapped in Virginia near the Chesapeake Bay. And how this happens is through, and you can kind of see it here on the map, is that as Cornwallis is marching around here, okay, you can see he lands in South Carolina and then just kind of marches everywhere, is that as he's working his way north, again, you can kind of see this far right green arrow. That is when he makes a mistake, and that is assuming that the armies that were up in New York and other places like that are not going to come down and get him, and they do. And so what happens then is he gets trapped, and he gets stuck inside the Chesapeake Bay, because again, there's Patriot forces who have been fighting him down here, and then he kind of just gets pocketed. Now the reason, if you kind of like think about this map, like, wait, don't the British have like a huge navy? Why wouldn't they just like, they get stuck in the Chesapeake Bay, why wouldn't they just leave? Well, they can't. And that is that the French have, at this point, shown up, and they seal off the Chesapeake Bay, and so Cornwallis has nowhere to go. And that is where we're going to get the whole Battle of Yorktown thing. And so, again, he's outnumbered, cut off, and is forced to surrender. Now, the treaty that is going to end the war is the Treaty of Paris. Okay, it's going to not only give Americans their independence, and then also all the land out to the Mississippi. The question that we're going to have to answer, and that really has never been answered, is what is all this independence going to mean? Like, what comes next? So you want a revolution, now what? And we'll have to explore that more in some future lessons. So that is our video for this mini lesson, and get the exit ticket done, and good luck studying for your quiz and some other things, and I will see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.